Welcome back. You're watching Your World at 10. Now, earlier today, the Greek government announced a €5 billion package of austerity measures that includes pay freezes for government employees and some higher taxes. Will this be enough? And is there a similar situation building in Spain? Well, joining us tonight, CNBC reporters Guy Johnson from Athens, Steve Sedgwick from Madrid, and in London joining us, Dr. Thanos Veramis of the Hellenic Observatory at the London School of Economics. We're going to come to each one of you gentlemen first, but Guy, why don't you sum up the situation in Greece as it stands right now?
The Greek package announced today is just the latest in a long line of austerity packages that have had to be delivered really since the start of this financial crisis. The third, almost in as many weeks, you could argue, coming out of Athens, and pretty much as expected, the latest round. Around $5 billion being shaved off, effectively the deficit. What we're talking about here is tax rises and also cuts to the civil service wage bill. Pretty much as expected. The question is what happens next, because we've now got this war of words breaking out between Athens and Berlin. Overnight, Papandreou, the Prime Minister here, said that it would be a catastrophe if Greece could not borrow on similar terms to the rest of the Eurozone. Today in Cabinet, he talked about the idea that maybe Greece should go to the IMF. That would be a big blow to the credibility of the whole Eurozone experiment. And today he went further and said that the Greek people had done their bit. Now it was the turn of the European Union to stand behind them. But Merkel is not budging. She is not giving any indication that Friday's meeting between Papandreou and herself in Berlin will deliver any kind of aid for Greece. Papandreou clearly wants aid. Merkel clearly doesn't want to give it. Who will break first? That's the question for the rest of the week. It's going to be a fascinating story to cover.
Guy Johnson, thank you very much. A fascinating story indeed. Part of that story also playing out in Madrid, in Spain, where the socialists met with conservative opposition members to work on a joint deal on reforms. Steve Sedgwick now has more on what's going on in Spain and how they're trying to come up with measures to meet the crisis.
Here in Spain, the government watching events on the ground in Greece, where they, of course, have announced a €5 billion austerity package. Spain and the Zapatero government has already announced a €50 billion austerity package, just underlining how serious a threat to the country the current malaise is. The country has to raise money in the markets as well this year. Estimates are for another €77 billion it has to go to the markets for, plus €36 billion of maturing debt. But this is a country with real big statistical problems. For instance, last year the economy contracted 3.6%, is still in recession and has a budget deficit of 11.4%. Added to that, structural problems surrounding the employment market, and you have some real issues which the government must confront. At the moment, Spain has a 19% unemployment rate, and that translates to a 43% rate by the time you look at 16 to 24-year-olds. It's also got the aftermath of the bursting of a property bubble. Some say that a lot of the asset holders haven't taken the real hit on the value of properties. Peak to trough valuations have only come down 15% compared with, for instance, the United States, where valuations have come off 30%, and that is leaving a massive oversupply of property on the market. Some estimates are for as high as 1.3 million homes still unsold in Spain. So the question is, has the Zapatero government done enough, and will it enact its austerity package? These are very big questions, of course, which go straight to the heart of Europe, because Spain is one of the big powerhouses, Eurozone's fourth largest economy, with an economy worth $1.6 trillion. Back to you.
Steve Sedgwick, thank you very much. Spain, they're also one of the crisis spots in the Eurozone. So what do these austerity measures in Greece mean, and how will the EU respond, if at all? Well, joining us with his expert perspective on the situation, Thanos Veramis of the Hellenic Observatory at the London School of Economics. Dr. Veramis, thank you very much for your time. The Greeks have spoken. They've said this is what we can do. It's now time for the EU to step up. What do you think the EU is likely to respond with? Can it afford not to act?
I don't think it can afford not to act, because this will have the effect will spread on other members of the European Union, as is usually the case with any country or any single market, as is the case with the European Union. The European Union is a single market with a single currency, but it's not a single country. For instance, the United States of America, which is a united country, so to speak, has California as its maverick. No one ever thought of leaving California without help. in a unified country. So that is more or less the predicament of Europe. If you have a single market and a single currency, but you don't have a finance minister to streamline the rest, you have to improvise and find ways of acting as a single entity. And I think this is what Europe will have to do right now.
Dr. Verimis, some of the media reports coming out of Greece and coming out of the Eurozone say that EU inspectors estimated the austerity plans announced so far will only go halfway due to a deeper than forecast recession. So maybe they're saying this is not enough. What would you like to see the EU do? Or are you in that camp that prefers to see some sort of aid or help come in from the IMF? Because many experts believe that the IMF coming in as an objective third party will be able to foster more discipline when in Greece than the EU will.
Well, there are several questions. One is, what will Europe do? Europe can either buy bonds, Greek bonds, at a reasonable price, or it can help Greece contract loans without high spreads. One or the other, I think, is what Greece is really expecting right now. Now, as far as the measures are concerned, whether they are enough or not, time will tell. My feeling is that they are fairly radical at this point. I think they will achieve their objective. I also should add that there is an overwhelming kind of agreement, as the polls at least say, on the part of the population, which will be struck by the austerity measures. So we have a good sign in the sense that most people agree that this is a necessary measure. Whether we will need to have more, time will tell, but time will tell very soon, in fact. Now, what effect will this have on the economy? Again, it's a question of dosage. Austerity is necessary, but you don't want too much austerity because you may kill the animal. If the economy goes into a deep recession, for instance, it won't be able to draw funds to pay its debts. So one needs a kind of measured medicine at this point.
If the EU steps in to help Greece in either one of the two measures that you pointed out, what does this mean for the other troubled spots across the Eurozone? I understand that, countries like Spain, Italy are not half as worse off as Greece is right now. But the fact is that they might need some help very soon as well. If the EU steps in to help Greece, then it's going to have to go around handing out the same assistance to many of these other countries in the Eurozone as well.
Not necessarily the same assistance, because each case merits a different kind of medicine. There are different problems, different sizes of states. Greece is a fairly small state, as is Portugal. The problem with the European Union is when it plunged into the economic and monetary union, it failed to unify in political terms. In that sense, it is a strange situation where a unified market, a single market, and a single currency doesn't have the political background that, let's say, a unified country has. And therefore, England never thought that it should discriminate between Sussex, London, and Manchester, let's say. It treats them all as part of the United Kingdom. Not so Europe. Europe plunged into this, into the single market. The single market produced benefits for the Europeans, and not just states that consume more than they export or produce, as is the case of Greece, but mostly chief exporting states such as France or Germany more so. Germany made bundles because of the unified market of Europe, the single market. It's not as though as if Germany suffered all this time. It has a huge surplus. It's a surplus country and it's doing very well, thank you. So in this sense, if it kills the hen that lays the golden eggs, it stands to lose. If either Greece or Portugal or Spain or the three of them default, that means the market that Germany is the king of that market will suffer.
All right, so you've also, in a sense, answered my question on what this means for the euro and the eurozone itself. The Greek Prime Minister is on his way towards the end of the week to meet with Angela Merkel and then Nicolas Sarkozy. How quickly do we need to see some supportive action come in from the EU for this crisis to be contained?
I think it will have to come fairly soon. I'm not among those who believe that the IMF is the ideal place to go at this point. It may be more streetwise, to put it in those terms. The IMF has more experience in bailing out countries. It failed in Argentina dismally. It succeeded in Hungary. It is successful, but it's not our own instrument. It's not an institution of the European Union. If the European Union refers its problems to the IMF, then in fact it's abdicating from its main role, which is to create a unified market and perhaps deepen its institutions. That is something that should have happened early on. The European Union preferred to expand, let's say, its domain rather than deepen its institutions. Enlargement instead of deepening. Why? Because when it was considering the possibilities of the unified market, the single market, the collapse of the Soviet Union occurred, and the southern European, Eastern European states suddenly appeared on the scene and demanded that they also become part of Europe. So there are enlargements but no deepening of institutions, and this is what is strange about the European Union.
All right, the EU must act, and the EU must act fast. In fact, Greece has roughly about 20 billion euros of debt that comes up for repayment in the months of March, April and May, and therefore the EU will have to come in with support very, very quickly. We should know by the end of the week. Thank you very much for joining us with your perspective, Dr. Varamis. We need to take a quick break on that note. We'll come